Welcome back to season 3 of Titans of Food Service. I'm your host, Nick Portillo, and I'm looking forward to taking you across America in 50 weeks, where I'm interviewing one Titan of food service in every single state. And on this week's episode, I'm going to be highlighting the state of North Dakota. And to do so, I'm welcoming Richard Byers. Richard's the division president of Cashway Distributing in North Dakota. So Richard's journey in the food service industry is pretty unique. He actually moved to North Dakota from Philly early on in his life, where he got his start in food service working in an Italian restaurant. In the episode and in our conversation, Richard and we're going to discuss the progression of his career and some of the obstacles that he's had to overcome along the way. At one point, he was working for Food Services America. He was there for about 12 years. And in that time, near the end of his tenure there at Food Services America, U.S. Foods acquired the Food Services America, which was a massive distributor up in the Northwest, in the Midwest for a very long time. And so we're going to talk about his experience being in Food Services America, being the company being acquired, how they become U.S. Foods for 30 days, his division at least, before ultimately becoming Cashway. It's a really fascinating and unique story. I think the acquisition of Food Services America by U.S. Foods is a very well-known, famous acquisition in our industry, and probably one that could be studied. Like I remember when I first got into food service, hearing about that. I'd never worked with Food Services of America just because of geography. I'm here in California. They weren't in California, but I totally remember all of that happening, and just a truly interesting time in our industry. But before we jump into the conversation with Richard and learn more about him and what he's currently up to in his business as the division president and what that looks like, I wanted to take a moment to explore the unique food service scene in North Dakota. So North Dakota is known for its strong agricultural roots. Its food service industry is deeply connected to its farming heritage. The state is a major producer of wheat, barley, and sunflowers, which play a significant role in its culinary landscape. The food service scene in the state is characterized by hearty, homegrown flavors with a focus on locally sourced ingredients. From farm-to-table dining to classic Midwestern comfort food, North Dakota offers a culinary experience that reflects its rich agricultural traditions. And with that, let's go ahead and welcome Richard. Okay, Richard, good morning. Welcome to the Titans of Food Service podcast. I appreciate you taking time to meet with me.
Good morning, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. What's the weather like in North Dakota during the summer?
So during the summer, this summer's been the hottest one we've had in a long time. We've been 90 plus a lot of days, actually. It's interesting you asked right now because we're just under 60 degrees. It's been the coldest week we've had all summer.
Wow.
About 59 degrees today, but the golfing weather's been very good. It's been actually one of the wettest summers we've had in a long time, but it was also one of the least amount of snow winters we've had in a really, really long time. So first time I can recall in 25 years of being out here that I did not start my snowblower.
Wow. Okay. I was listening to somebody that said like shoveling snow, I would imagine is probably a thing for you out there.
Popular.
Like shoveling snow it's a workout, because each shovel is like 20 to 40 pounds, every scoop of snow or ice.
Yes. So that's actually what a lot of emergencies are called in the winter, is because of shoveling, actually, for ambulances and such. It is a brutal winter out here usually. But that said, the summers are beautiful too. So you take the good with the bad.
Totally. I've been to South Dakota and Iowa, Sioux Falls area. I don't know if I was on the border of North Dakota as well. Maybe I flew in there. When I think of North Dakota, I think of January Jones, the actress.
Oh, sure.
I know she's from
Mad
North
Men,
Dakota,
right?
That's right,
Yep.
Mad Men. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's a few celebrities from here, but yeah, for the most part, North Dakota is known for its agriculture and obviously some oil business years back. So
Definitely. So tell me, how'd you get into the food business?
So I got into it at a really young age. So I was actually my freshman year of high school. A buddy of mine said I wanted to start working. I was a paper boy for a long time and wanted to get into a normal job. And so he said, "Hey, my friend's hiring for a dishwasher." So I decided to get into the industry. I was about 13, 14 years old. Absolutely loved the camaraderie of the kitchen, of the hospitality industry. And I did it now for I don't know, over the last 30 plus years of my life, whether it's in the back of the house, front of the house, delivering groceries, you name it. I just absolutely love the industry.
Yeah, my dad, he had kind of similar. So my dad and I, we work together. So he's been in the food business his whole life. So when he was 15, 16 years old, he became worked at a meat market
Okay.
as a butcher, and did that for a few years, him and his brother, and then they started their own little shop, and then eventually Cisco, with their Cisco rep, came by and said, "Hey, why don't you come try Cisco?" So my dad became their center of the plate specialist, and then
Mm.
got in the broker business thereafter. But it's interesting how people get into this industry. They got in young because their parents needed help, you know, needed more money coming in for the family and things like that. But here he is. He's still in the food business, 30, 40, probably 30, 40 years later. So it's been a fun ride, and I think a great career for him here in the food business.
Very interesting story. Yeah. So this was actually an Italian restaurant I started at. I'm originally from Philadelphia. So I do live in Fargo, North Dakota now. But I moved out here about when I was 19, 20 years old. And I actually did own an Italian restaurant out here as a
Wow.
minority owner. But at 20 years old, you have a piece of something bigger than yourself. And so that also gives you the opportunity, to see bigger picture, to understand what it's like to manage people at a young age, as well as understanding the financial fundamentals of the business and the margins that are slim for our operators.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, how did you get in? You started in restaurants and
Mhm.
working at an Italian restaurant. So you moved from Philly to North Dakota,
Correct.
work in an Italian restaurant. Um, how did you get into the distribution business? Where does that come along?
So, one of my biggest failures that I've had, I guess, was the closure of the restaurant. So I was about 22 years old, give or take, maybe 23, somewhere in there, and I came back from a vacation, and one of my business partners goes, "Listen, things aren't going as well as we originally anticipated, and we got about 60 days left. You can either fire your entire staff, or you can resign now, and we can just allow it to dissipate." And I said, okay, well, I don't want to fire every single person today, so I will resign. And then you can use that money for whatever you need to do. That said, I was getting out of the business, candidly. I was working a lot of hours, as you know, in this industry, you work a lot of hours. And it wasn't that it was unfeasible for me at the time. It was very doable, and I was young and I was ambitious, but I don't know, something in me just said, "Hey, you've been doing this for a bit." Someone came knocking with insurance and investments, and I've always been intrigued by numbers. And so I said, "All right, I'll go out and get my insurance license." So I did that and got the book and took the test like a week later. All I did was study for a whole week, passed. So that was back in '02, and I was a insurance agent, I guess. So I was in Western
Yeah.
North Dakota before the oil boom doing that. And ironically enough, to get back into the industry, one of our long-term customers, her and another lady, were both in the healthcare industry and decided to buy a restaurant with a chef. So they had three partners in this small restaurant, but it was very fine dining. And I guess there was a falling out of the ownership. Chef left, and so next thing you know, they're calling. I had no preconceived notions of getting back in the industry, but they were great people. So ultimately, I just wanted to help. So they said, "Hey, we're going to pay you X if you work here for a couple hours a week." And then it turned into, we want to put you on salary, and then it turned into 60, 70 hours a week. And then realistically, my insurance career started to dwindle away a little bit. And I still did a little bit, but the reality is, when you're working 70 hours a week, you're doing staffing, you're doing ordering, you're doing all the executive chef duties when you weren't really planning on it. So, to answer how I got into the distribution side, during that time, I became pretty good friends with a district manager at Cisco at the time. He came in, and because of my previous restaurant, I had two marketing associates, as they call the DSRs at Cisco, arguing over the account, because one was my former rep and one was my current rep. And candidly, in talking with the district manager, I said, honestly, they're both great people. I really don't care who my sales rep is. I know what I want. They know what I want. I could order online if you have that ability. I said, they're both great, and it really doesn't matter to me." And he goes, "Do you ever think about selling groceries?" And I said, candidly, I've never thought of that in my whole life. And he goes, "Well, I think you'd be really good at it. What are you doing later tonight?" And I said, when I get off, I have no plans. So we went, we met at a local bar and we sat there for about an hour and talked about the industry and talked about what Cisco does and how they impact, the operator. So I was intrigued. 2 days later, I met with the regional sales manager out of Minneapolis. Really enjoyed that gentleman and decided, you know what, I'm going to take a plunge. And I went for it. So I applied there, became a marketing associate, was there for 5 years, absolutely loved it, great company. And that's how I got into distribution. And ironically enough, I was at a Minneapolis branch and I had the pleasure of being part of the rollout of the Fargo facility during my tenure there. So that gave me another perspective of how a big corporation rolls out a new warehouse when you believe when you're a sales rep at an organization of that size, you just believe they're everywhere already. Why would they ever need another facility? We're nationwide, blah blah blah. But ironically enough, they did need a new facility, and I had the ability to be part of that, and that was life changing for me, honestly, in distribution. And it helped me further my career when I came over to FSA. We actually closed one of the facilities here during my tenure, and I was instrumental in the Gantt chart and the whole production of that as well. So, uh,
That's incredible
it,
to go from 22, 23, having to take that sacrifice and step away from the business, doing what's best for the employees. I think you mentioned that might have been one of your biggest failures you've ever had. Like, what a selfless move that was, to go into the insurance business, something completely different than to get back into the restaurant industry to eventually end up here in distribution. Um, what a what a cool ride that's been to get to where you're at and to join Cisco and learn the systems and process. I want to learn a little bit more. You mentioned the Gantt chart as well. How does that come into the
so
picture?
when we were doing so I got to go backwards to go forward. So I came over to Food Services of America back in late '07. So I did have
Okay.
a very good career at Cisco, and like I said, I really enjoyed the company and everything. And so I actually came back from a torchbearers trip to a phone call from a stranger. I returned the phone call. Turns out to be a recruiter. So we literally just had a baby. My son was 3 months old at the time. We're building a new house, and I decided to leave Cisco, where I was very, very, I don't want to say we're comfortable, but secure. And said, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm going to go to an independent distributor that I know very little about, that I've obviously been doing a very good job of competing against in the same exact marketplace. So I took a leap of faith. My wife was very supportive at the time. That said, we were building a house, had a baby, moved into FSA. So going further, I've had several positions when I was at Food Services of America. And the last one I had there prior to us becoming Cashway, which was an acquisition we can get into too as well. But um, we had a Minot facility. So we were actually called the Dakota Group. We had a Fargo facility and a Minot facility. And so all of the administrative, buying, things like that were done locally here in Fargo, and the Minot facility was a operational hub for us. We did a building expansion here in 2016 because we outgrew the building. With that expansion, it gave us the ability to really look at our business from a macro level, going, where are we? Where should we be? We were transferring a lot of product, handling things more than 1, 2, 3 times to get it to Minot, to get it out to our customers. We gave them a better opportunity to purchase later in the day, so a later cut time for our customers, and a bigger breadth of product offering by closing the Minot facility, which kudos to the FSA leadership. We did all the right things for the associates, and this goes back to what I was talking about before, and just doing the right thing for people. And that's why I think I love this industry so much. That said, we did close the facility. It was the best interest of the organization. We also kept the interest of the associates at the time. Some of them still work here today in Fargo, as and we may have mentioned in the past. But that said, it was the right move. So we used the Gantt chart to go forward, for lack of a better term, backwards to go forward. Had our timelines on the chart. Operations was in charge of some things, sales was in charge of others. Finance made sure all the customer numbers migrated over and things of that nature. But really, the heavy lifting was on the operational side and the sales side. So my role, or my biggest role, was communication with the associates and the customers. How is this going to be perceived, right? And with the media, when the phone calls started coming in, you're eliminating jobs,
Mm.
you're doing this, you're doing that. Well, we really weren't. We were just moving jobs, for lack of a better term. I think we did wind up losing about 8 total positions through the whole entire migration, which is which
Okay.
is which
Yeah.
is
Wow.
unfortunate, but at the same time, it's very minimal in the grand scheme of what we accomplished. Because at that time
Absolutely.
we had about 237 employees. So we dealt with the media as far as, hey, what are your questions, and let's make sure we're facilitating them the appropriate way, and then also with our customers, because candidly, a lot of those people have been buying from that facility for 30 plus years, and they go, "What do you mean you're closing?" We had to explain, why it was better for the customer, why it was better for the associate, and then the associate's fears. That was the other biggest part of my contribution was that. And I believe we alleviated all of them. We didn't lose any outside salespeople through the process, which was outstanding. We promoted some inside salespeople to outside salespeople, and they were very successful after that. So it was great. Um, that said, operations had the really heavy lifting job. So they had to take all the inventory out of that facility and drive it the 4.5, 5 hours in many, many semis over the course of a weekend so that our inventory was right sized by Sunday evening for order selection.
That's that's a big undertaking to do that for
It
sure.
was.
What about the so you're dealing with the media, you're joining the teams together. I would imagine, and that's impressive too. Only 8 jobs overall didn't make it
Mhm.
out over almost 250. That's very unheard of. A lot of times you see these types of acquisitions, and it's a lot of people
Correct.
are going to be out of work. What about the joining of the cultures? Going because it's two companies coming together, two different ways of doing business. How did the people and what about the customers that now were had been using one distributor prior, now using a new one? How did they take that as well?
So it's interesting you said, so this particular closure wasn't a real cultural integration because
Okay.
everyone already worked the food services. All we really did was close a distribution center.
Got
So
it. Okay.
products were the same for the customer, same sales reps, same systems. So they didn't have to learn a new e-commerce system or anything like that. But to answer your question in a broader scope, as far as when we became cashway distributing,
Yes, please.
so that was in late October of 19. So for those of you who don't know, Food Service of America was acquired by U.S. Food Service, or U.S. Foods now. And so during that time, 3 of the markets had to be divested by the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. So we were one of them, Fargo, North Dakota. So Boise, Idaho, and Kent, Washington were the other 2. So through that process, everyone believed for a very long time we were going to become U.S. Foods, and we all did, until we were told that that wasn't going to happen. And so there was a lot of, I guess, anxiety, for lack of a better term. We have 2 U.S. Foods facilities in the state of North Dakota, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and Bismarck, North Dakota, as well as one in Minneapolis. So everybody was like, "I'm going to lose my job. We're getting acquired by a big company. We're all out of a job. That's it." So we did have a lot of loss, unfortunately, just because we didn't know what we didn't know. And so people made that gut reaction, which I totally understand, right? You got a family to feed, you got to take care of yourself. You got to think long term. That said, we did not become U.S. Foods. We became Cashway Distributing. Cashway Distributing is a great organization. So they had 2 facilities in Kearney, Nebraska, as our corporate office. They had one in Aberdeen, South Dakota. So we competed a little bit with Aberdeen, South Dakota, but not Kearney, Nebraska. So we didn't know a lot about who we were becoming either, because we only had about a 30-day notice of this is what's happening today. So as far as communication, that was very difficult because I was learning as I was communicating. So to facilitate, hey, this is going to be great, without a lot of native knowledge, it was difficult. That said, the Henning family and just the overall communication of Cashway was fantastic. Here's who we are. Here's what we do. When we did have the cut over, so we actually became U.S. Foods for 30 days, which was super
Wow.
odd. And I'll allude to why it was so odd. So we were FSA on 9/10 of 19. We became U.S. Foods on 9/11 of 19, and then we became Cashway on 10/12 of 19. In that time, we had a food show already pre-scheduled. So it was actually on 9/18, and I remember it because it was my birthday. And so we were not FSA, we were not Cashway, and we were not US Food. So we had the most generic food show of any food distributor in the history of food shows. We basically were showing every national brand we had, a lot of produce, some Packer labeled stuff, and basically answering questions that we didn't have the answers to for our customers. But, we talk about relationships in this business, and candidly, that is what took us through the pandemic, took us through all these different changes we've gone through over the years. The reality is our customers trust our associates, and we trust our associates to do the right thing. So through that, with our drivers being as present as they are, because they're great. Yeah, they have a hard job, but they're always going through the door with a smile. All of our customers know our drivers. All of our customers know our sales associates. So because of those relationships at the most awkward food show in the world, we were able to go, listen, you still know your sales rep, you still know your driver, and you know me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm changing roles, but you still know me. You got my cell phone number. I think that reassurance, or that comfort blanket, for lack of a better term, just made people go, yeah, you know what? They are changing the French fries that they sell, but I trust them. They're going to do the right thing by me, so I'm sticking with them.
Incredible.
So it's
I
been a
mean,
journey.
yeah, no kidding. And by the way, 9/18, that's your birthday you mentioned. That's
Yeah.
also my wedding anniversary. I was born. I was got married on September 18th.
That's outstanding.
Um, yes. So what about you? So you're going through this transition back
Mhm.
in 2019. You're kind of in limbo a little bit for 30 days, and then you become Cashway. What was the process for you to become the president of Cashway there in North Dakota?
So through the process, so obviously there was a lot going on. We're communicating how, hey, everybody, for the last 14 months you believed we were going to be X. Well, today we're going to be Y. So I was, for lack of a better term, the conduit for all things communication. And our president at the time was pretty close to retirement. I wouldn't say he was, one day away or anything like that, but pretty close. So he goes, basically, I'm grooming you for the next level. This is even a year. This might even been before the announcement of FSA being sold. And so I was already on that trajectory. Obviously, I was as nervous as anybody else. So, hey, we're getting bought out now. What does this do for the path we were on? But he was a great leader, great mentor. We stayed the course. He goes, it really doesn't matter. He goes, you're learning it either way, right? And I said, well, that's true. And he goes, someone will want what you got. Hopefully, it's here. I said, fair enough. So, to answer your question on how I got to where I'm at, um, through that process, I had the ability to work with the CEO, COO, president, CFO of Cashway through the whole entire process. Because of that, on the day one of the acquisition, they announced me as the president. So they saw what I brought to the table. I'm not tooting my own horn or anything like that. I did what was necessary. But they knew I was here for the long term. I was a team player, and I had the best interest of our associates in mind. And that, above everything else, is exactly what Cashway stands for.
Amazing. I'm curious, when you look at the other distributors maybe in your area, or maybe when your time at Cisco, seeing their leadership, did the people it seems like you have a sales and operations background, and sometimes I've seen, like, people come in who will be a president who have, like, a finance background,
Sure.
or they have a background in other things. How do you feel like a sales and operations background has helped you in this position?
It's a great question. So I feel like it's helped, especially on the sales side, with communication. I've just always been comfortable getting up in front of a room or a Zoom or anything like that in front of a large group of people. And because I was comfortable, I think it made the audience comfortable as well. Whereas, you brought up finance, and I know some of the most outgoing finance people in the world who could do the same thing. In fact, one of my buddies is the president of a different organization, but he's very outgoing in the finance. He is an accountant, but he's just I don't want to say there's a typical anything, but he is not a typical person. And so he gets up there, and I mean, you think you're watching Tony Robbins. So in kind of going in unison with something like that, I mean, I'm up there and I'm telling you the good news. I'm also telling you the bad news, but I'm telling it in a way where you can digest it, right? Sometimes I think if you have this idea of this is the way I speak at this level, and not everyone comprehends it. There's more questions when you leave by speaking in tongues that people don't understand rather than just the simplest terms known to man. And I'm a very simple guy. I'm a very straightforward guy. So when you leave a meeting with me telling you, here's why we got to do what we got to do, there's no confusion on, I wonder what that acronym meant, or I wonder exactly what he means by that. I think that straightforward approach, as far as the operations too, right? So when you're talking operations, they want to know exactly what they need to do. They don't need the fluff or any. What do I got to get done? You tell them, they do it. I mean, that's who they are. They get stuff done. And so, answering your question on both sides of that, it's one, it's communication and comfort, and two, it's know your audience.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about when it comes to when you look at your organization as a whole? You've mentioned relationships a few
Hmm.
times, especially through, these transitions and the customers knowing your sales associates knowing you. Are you cultivating their skills? I've seen, here in California, there's so many different distributors. There's hundreds of them, and everyone does it a little bit differently. You have the really large ones, Cisco, US Foods, that are national, that down to the jobber trade and how they go to market with their sales team. Each one's uniquely different. Are you cultivating your team? Do you have them go through a training so that they can? I would imagine you have people on your team that have been there, done that forever. They know exactly what to do. But then you will have people at some point that are brand new, have never sold a thing in their life. Are you cultivating people, and what does that look like?
So it's an interesting topic because it's one we just had a conversation about just the other day. And yes, we are. Are we doing it to the best of our ability? Has been a real question. So the reason I say it the way I just said it is, yes, we have so many veterans that have been here a long time, right? If we look at certain districts in our footprint, we have people an average tenure of 12 years in a district. Then we have districts
Wow.
where the average tenure is 6 months.
Yeah.
So yes, we have both ends of the spectrum. And so what we try to do is bring those two together. And it's tough with our geography because, in the state of North Dakota, and you brought up, South Dakota, and they're all very big states with low population. So to try and get
Hmm.
someone from, even let's just say Alexandria, Minnesota, to work with someone in Williston, North Dakota, that's a 9.5 hour, 10-hour drive to go, hey, we really want you to
Oh
work with
my
this person.
gosh.
But you want someone to work with someone in their area so you see how they operate on a day-to-day basis. So if we took someone who was already established and put them into a new territory, you would not see them in their comfort environment or how they act on a day-to-day basis. They would still be themselves, but not as in an environment they're used to. So we do some of that. Again, we have some geographical challenges, but we make it work. Our trainer's outstanding. So our trainer's been a district sales manager. He's been a sales rep. He's been a trainer at one of our larger distribution centers in the past. He's very well rounded. Worked with 3 different DCs when we were Food Services of America, and now we're fortunate enough we've had him ongoing since he transferred from Billings, Montana. So he does all of our tech training and things like that. One of our unique value propositions I believe we bring to the table is the people. So you brought up like some of the bigger entities and things like that. And I understand technology's here, it's staying. I understand it. I love it myself. Not all of our customers do. They don't want you to hand them the app to their iPhone and say, here you go, just punch it right in and be here tomorrow. And they go, I don't want to do that. So I think we're training to the older school mentality, and I'm not saying that's all we're doing. We're obviously doing the tech side of it too, but some of our
Mhm.
most successful reps and some of our longest tenured customers are still wanting their sales rep to take their order
Yeah,
because
I could see that.
they trust them, they believe them, they know what they're looking for. Sometimes you give somebody a complete product guide, they get very confused because they're looking at 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 items, and they go, "Is this my fry?" And yeah, you can load by history and things like that, but if that's not what you want for your business, then that's not what you want. So one thing we really train to is get to know your customer. Know your customer inside and out. And I'll give you 2 examples from this last week alone. I had one
Yeah, love
customer
that.
give me a call this week and said, or 2 weeks ago, and said, "Hey, do you have any time coming up? I've owned my business now for 22 years. I have no succession plan. I have no siblings. My parents are getting older, and I'd really like to have a conversation with you about this. We do business with this person. We're not their primary vendor. Their business is our primary wheelhouse. but we've had a long-term relationship. And so I said, absolutely, let's meet. So we met this week and discussed every option under the sun for their business. And by the time we left, they turned to me and said, I am a lot less stressed about the next 5 years than I was prior to our meeting. So thank you very much. So that
Incredible.
alone adds that clout of we care about our customers because we really do. And another
Mhm.
one that I met this week, never met this gentleman before in my life. I was out doing some interviews in a western part of our distribution area. And so I wanted to see some customers or potential customers while I was out there because I actually thrive on that. And I know a lot of people get nervous, but for me, that's what I love. So I went in and met this gentleman, and he was in the middle of doing ServeSafe because he was struggling with keeping help. And he goes, I'm the general manager. He's like, I got to get a ServeSafe certification because I candidly don't have anybody right now who is ServeSafe certified. So I said, oh, I totally understand that. We talked about the program. But reality was, we're obviously trying to sell this person some groceries, right? But the reality was that's not what this gentleman needed right now. So I said, I understand you've been working with our sales rep and our district manager, and I just want to introduce myself and who I am. And he goes, do you really want to do business with me? And I said, well, we do, but I said, I want to understand your challenge. I mean, you're sitting here in front of a laptop taking a 2-hour ServeSafe class. Obviously, there's probably something else you'd rather be doing. And he goes, you find me a kitchen manager and I'll give you all my business. He goes, you sell food. I assume you're priced pretty competitively. I trust the sales rep that you've been sending in here. And he goes, I just haven't made any changes because I don't have any employees that show up. And I
Mm.
said, okay, so what exactly do you need? So we went through the whole gamut, who he was looking for, the hours that person would work. And basically I went to the district manager and said, let's get to work. So we're using all 3 or 4 of the sales reps in that market to try and identify somebody who'd be a good fit um, without cannibalizing from one of our current customers. So we're trying to fulfill a need without taking away from people that we already do business with. But it's not just onus is just not on that one sales rep who's calling on that account. Now the onus is on all those people who can impact that person's success.
The way your mentality and the way that you work with your customers reminds me of a distributor here. And the president of their company is also a sales background,
Hmm.
and he has helped so many different customers throughout the territory that they cover, because he started as a sales rep and then he moved up to be the president of the company. And like, helping out customers, kind of going that extra mile as opposed to just giving them a better price, or finding a product that they need. Like, you're actually helping their overall business. And I've heard stories of what this gentleman has done, helping businesses just survive or just make it, and going above and beyond. I'd also be curious too, like, you've been doing this now for a while. You've probably seen a lot of changes in the business, in the side of the business that I'm in, the food broker business, and how they impact your overall, go to market, and your overall business. I would imagine helping customers as well. Tell me a little bit about that, how you've worked with food brokers in the past.
Absolutely. So it's interesting you bring that up. So one of the things that we had here at Food Service, and we've carried it over as we became Cashway, is we have a pretty open door policy with our brokers and our vendors. We want to know all of them. So one of our core values or guiding principles is integrity to our customers and our suppliers. Um, that said, we want to do what's right for our customer first and foremost, but we also want to do what's right for our vendors. So in talking to you briefly the other day about just brokers in general, there's this notion that, obviously there's a lot of consolidation going on within the brokerage
Yeah.
world. And that's no different in any part of the country. But that said, it doesn't matter how big they get or how family owned they are or whatever. The relationship is what matters. Um,
Mm.
and so to answer your question, how do we use them? We make sure that the reps know who they all are, what lines they broker. They have access to a database where it's, let's just say, I'm looking for French fries, type in French fries. Here's all the French fry manufacturers. Here's who brokers them, or the manufacturer name and contact info. We want that information accessible at all times because our brokers are an extension of ourselves, the right ones, right? So, I mean, it's no different than a sales rep. So, if you called the same sales rep 4 times, you never received a call back. As a customer, you're probably thinking, maybe not a good fit. So, no
Yeah.
different with a broker, right? And we built those relationships over time. And candidly, I think they're the strongest in the industry because a lot of people are getting away from utilizing a third party, for lack of a better term, because they are a third party, but at the same time, they have the same goals you do. Provide a value cut product to a customer to provide to their consumer. It's no different. Where I think we are different is we do want brokers in our car with our sales reps. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's the same as it's been in the past. I've noticed a change or a shift. I personally, when I was a sales rep at any organization or a DM or whatever, I would utilize brokers as if they were part of my district. My relationship
Mm.
was so tight with them that it was okay. Well, if Nick's my guy, we're selling all Nick's lines, and here's how we're doing it. And the whole district would have the same mentality. And Nick would be at the quarterly sales meetings. That he'd be in the car. I mean, that's just what we did because we knew the value of it. Now, today, going back to how's it changed? Some of the brokers have 200 vendors. It's gotten a little more complex on their end, I think. I don't think we've
Yeah.
changed really at all. I just think it's gotten a little harder for that broker rep who's running around and trying to fulfill all of his vendor commitments because some of those
Yeah.
commitments get to be a little larger than time allots, to be honest, in a month. I don't think you could, if you have 200 vendors, and I'm obviously throwing a number out there, I don't know how
Mhm.
you represent that many in a 30-day period, regardless of how organized you are.
Yeah, it's impossible, to do that much, at some point, it's like diminishing returns, like, you can't keep it all straight in your head, there's just not enough hours in the day, and you're only one person. Now, if you
Right.
can multiply yourself by 20,
Sure.
then different story, but that's not no one's created that technology yet.
So one other thing on
And
brokers, if I may,
yeah.
food show wise, absolutely invaluable. The brokers have been, because you go post COVID, right? People we're still hesitant to go out or do anything that would impede their business, right? Because they're short staffed. So we brought the road shows closer to our customers. So we're doing four of them geographically instead of one centralized because you can't get away for 2 3 days. Well, the brokers are
Mhm.
building those same relationships in those geographies with our customers because they're getting to know them through those shows. So invaluable. We couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know we've got a large food show upcoming out here in Southern Cal in a couple weeks, and we've got 10 booths, and it's a whole, it's a whole production for us, and it's
Really is.
important to us. It's a
Hmm.
great way to meet with the distributor, their reps, right? Build a relationship
Yep.
with them or continue a relationship. It's also good to see operators that we work with and then also build new relationships with new operators as well.
Hmm.
And what better way, instead of driving around all day in Los Angeles traffic, you can, maybe let's just say at the very least you see 10, 15 customers that are all right there. And so just the time it takes to see them is so much easier than
Oh,
driving around all over the place.
agreed.
If you could go back to that kid who moved from Philly to North Dakota, working in the Italian restaurant, what advice would you give to him?
So I guess my biggest thing was never stop learning. And what I mean by that is when I took that leap of faith to go to the insurance industry and some other things, and since then I've started a small real estate company. I've been doing that now since probably 2012. Got a real estate
Wow.
license. I mean, my big thing I guess is never give up. Always be the hardest worker in the room, and that's not a cliche or anything like that. I just always was. I mean, I saw you did an Ironman.
Yep.
We discussed that a little bit. I did a marathon in a very similar fashion. Was sitting there one day, we were talking about it, and one of our coworkers was a marathon runner. She's like, "Oh, it's so hard, this, that, and the other thing." And we just talked through it, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to do it too." Had about three whopping months of not training slash signing up. I did complete it. I didn't qualify for Boston or anything, but I did it. So it's just one of those mentalities, I guess. I would tell myself never give up and just keep going. I mean, the trials and tribulations. I've been through some struggles, obviously, in life, and everybody goes through them, right? But really stay focused on yourself and bet on yourself. would be my best
Mhm.
advice, because nobody knows you better than yourself. If you give up, what's the outcome? If you don't give up, what's the outcome? I mean, you have two choices,
Yeah.
right? And then the other part of that is network, network, network. And what I mean by networking is, don't go out and just try to meet people. Strategically go out and build relationships. So you might be in a room with 10 people of influence, that's great. But really, you're trying to accomplish meeting someone who can help you with your future goals or your current goals, and vice versa. Um, for instance, I'm going to a Vistage meeting later this next month, and I'm going to
Yeah.
potentially meet some executives there that I've never met before in different industries, and I want to understand what makes their organization tick. What are they doing better than what I'm doing? What value could I bring to them in a conversation? So always network, because there's always somebody smarter than you. There's always somebody who can learn from you. But as long as you're in that middle of the road and you can benefit and you can benefit others, and you try to do both of those things on a daily or weekly basis, you yourself will get better.
I'm a member of EO, Entrepreneurs
Oh,
Organization, which is similar to
hmm.
Vistage. I have a broker partner who is a member of Vistage. I have friends that are in YPO. Those are great organizations to surround yourself with other people who are going through similar things that you are going
Hmm.
through. Sometimes, like in your situation, running a company could feel lonely, or maybe that you get it to a certain level and like you have to punch through that wall
Yep.
to get even more. And so like if I'm doing $10 in sales today, how do I get to 100? I want to talk to someone who's done 100, like to
Yes.
help me get to that point. So good for you for doing that. What about looking into the future? Long down the road here in your career, your personal life, what is something that you want to achieve that you've not yet achieved?
So I guess one of the things I really want to achieve is probably doing another marathon, maybe in my
Yeah.
early 50s. So I did skydiving. I know you're out in California. Short story, I'd like to
Hmm.
do this again. So years ago, I was out. There were some customers that came out a day early. We were going through some produce trainings and whatnot in Salina, and I was with one of our district managers at the time. And so we went golfing with our customer a day before, and we were dropping them off at the airport. And I said, "What are we going to do today? Everybody is flying in later today. I want to do something." So I said, "Pick anything in the world you want to do, and we're going to do it today." And she goes, "Let's go skydiving." She was totally joking. And I said, "Done. Start researching skydiving places." So this is at 7 o'clock in the morning. We're leaving San Francisco Airport, I believe it was, or San Jose, one of the two. And we were jumping out of an airplane at 2:30 in the afternoon at Bay Area Skydive that day. Um,
Wow.
so things like that, I guess. So to answer your question, there's actually things that'll probably pop up that are now going to become short and long term goals for me that I may not have even
Yeah.
thought of before. So I guess some of my goals though are, where do I see my children going next? My son's 17. He's already
Hmm.
working two jobs. My daughter just got a President's Award graduating from elementary school for her achievements there. Um, so
Wow.
so I'm excited for both of my children. I'm excited for where they're headed. And candidly, I mean, what I see my role is helping them get to the next level of their careers, while staying healthy myself and always continuing to learn. Like I said, I got a real estate license. I went out and I read all the time now. I kind of discarded it, I guess, in my mid 30s, give or take.
Yeah.
And now I'm in my mid 40s. And so I got back to reading. YouTube videos are obviously fantastic too, but just learning a new skill, all the time learning. So I guess continuous learning is my long term goal, because it keeps you
Fantastic.
sharp and just gives you a reason to wake up every morning.
I mean, look at some of the most successful people on the planet, like Warren Buffett. He swears by continuous learning,
Hmm.
and he's what in his 90s, and I
Right.
think he reads some crazy amount of pages in a book every day. It's like incredible how much that guy is still learning, and he's many, many, many years our senior for sure. Well, Richard, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story. I really enjoyed it. How you've been able to become the president here of Cashway. Congratulations. I mean, that's just truly an incredible feat. And thank you for kind of peeling back the layers and sharing as well. I think there's a lot of people out there that are just starting in food service, or maybe they're in the midway part of their career, wherever they may be, where they want to move up, or they want to make a change, or they want to do something different. And people like yourself sharing your story, it really makes an impact. So thank you.
Well, I thank you for having me. This was a great experience, and it made me think about a lot of things I haven't thought about for a long time, to be very candid, like how I got here and the journey. And sometimes you just have to look backward to look forward, and this was fantastic for me as well. But if there is anybody I could ever help in their journey, I'm always available.
Fantastic. Richard, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick.